we kind of got our eye off the ball there. I do think that it's good that NATO troops have been increasing. Germany just sent more troops, so it's good that our European allies are increasing their support. And I do think that we've made significant progress there. This war-torn country that had many invaders and had brutal regimes, now we're fixing their infrastructure. Hospitals and schools are being built. Women are allowed to go out in public. Women are allowed to go to school. These are significant advances to this country.
First thing I'll say is to leave Iraq right away would be a wrong decision, but at the same time, they have a $79 billion surplus. So what that means is they need to start taking responsibility for some of their infrastructure. So I disagree fundamentally with a timetable, but at the same time, are we going to wake up one morning and say, well, there's sustained infrastructure's there, all right, we're out of here. That's not the way it's going to be. We're going to continue to have a presence in Iraq, and that's going to commit troops and brigades and dollars that we don't have, that we need to turn to Afghanistan and Pakistan.
I want you to mull this over, because one of the big issues in this presidential campaign, people talk about judgment, and Obama says, look at the judgment McCain used to go into Iraq. That was the wrong judgment. It's hindsight, but it was still an issue of judgment. On the other hand, McCain says, look at the judgment that Obama uses when he wants to go after the bad guys into Pakistan and not worry about the sovereignty. In one instance, we have someone being aggressive in foreign policy a few years ago and wanting to go in Iraq. And we have someone else on the political left who's over a year and a half ago showed the most aggressive foreign policy position and wanting to go after the Taliban or the Al-Qaeda in Pakistan. So the question of judgment comes up. So talk about the candidate you care about. We'll start out with the Republicans over there, and the issue of judgment, because in both cases they criticize each other for using bad judgment. So weigh that.
Well, first of all, it's easy for Barack Obama to say that McCain had poor judgment in agreeing that we should go into Iraq, since he wasn't even in Congress at the time that this was happening. I think it's quite clear who has clearer judgment here. Obama has always opposed the surge, and he still fails to admit that it's even worked. For him to suggest that we should use military force against Pakistan if they don't release bin Laden is ridiculous. We need to not start a war in that country as well. We need to keep using diplomacy with them. Yes.
To rebut that, yes, he was. Barack Obama was. He actually voted against going in there. So that idea that he hasn't is completely false. And in terms of the surge, has he admitted that it has worked? No. But the fact of the matter is that's common sense. You send more troops in, it's going to work. In a football game, you put in better players, you're going to win.
Just a quick point of attention here. Obama wasn't in Congress, but there was a vote for it in the Illinois State House before he voted against it. So, for whatever
I think
that's
it's worth pointing out that Republicans weren't the only ones that supported going into this war at the start.
Right.
It had support from the majority of Congress: Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden. I mean, you could go on and on. Even Bill Clinton thought that Saddam Hussein did in fact have weapons of mass destruction. So there's a lot of blaming game going around here, but in reality, the fact is that everyone supported the war from the start. Republicans just want to finish it, or Democrats want to retreat.
Before we get to a Democrat who's going to say a lot of things here, even Saddam Hussein believed he had weapons of mass destruction because his generals were afraid to tell him that he didn't. In case you guys wonder. Go ahead.
Well, it's interesting to point out that she claims all Americans supported it. Senator Russ Feingold from Wisconsin voted against it. We re-elected him in 2006, so apparently not all members of Congress did. Also, roughly, depending on what poll you looked at, 40 to 50% of Americans also didn't want to go into Iraq. So apparently not everyone was on the same page with this plan. Going back to the initial question about the importance of judgment, I believe it points out that indeed Senator Obama is making the decision he feels is the best interest of the country. Does he not want military force? Hopefully not. As someone who opposes the idea of using military force instead of talking with other countries, I would encourage him to use that first. But he's also said he's willing to use diplomacy and said he's willing to go into conversations and negotiations with other countries without pretenses. This idea is a good idea, revolutionary in fact. Diplomacy that actually does that, just talking between two countries. The fact that he is violating that he's pushing for the violation of possible sovereignty of Pakistan is a problem. But if we can work with the Pakistani government and Afghanistan government, who both want to work with us, and we're not violating anybody's sovereignty, and instead, we have all three governments working together to solve one problem. The war in Iraq was a bad choice. As someone who opposed it in a personal sense, I was not proud we went to war. However, we're there. So the solution is simple. Even 16 months, as Senator Obama has stated, we look to work for the future. We're not saying we're leaving in 16 months and not ever talking to them again or supporting them economically. We're one of the biggest backers in this world from a financial standpoint. We're obviously going to help their government, as we've done with their $79 billion surplus. We can use some of that money right now.
I just got a text message from the Beach Boys, the singing group, and they sent me a question to ask you folks. What should we do if Iran becomes nuclear power? And I think we'll move to the Democrat in this case.
If they have nuclear weapons, you're saying?
Nuclear
correct?
weapons, yeah.
Okay.
Excuse me. They already have nuclear power. They're helped by the French. And they're reprocessing stuff in order to build weapons-grade uranium using centrifuges.
I think it's a danger we have to realize in that, indeed, Iran, of all the countries in the world that have nuclear weapons, Iran's kind of dangerous. Recently, North Korea, in fact, yesterday, they were taken off the terrorist list because they allowed inspectors back in after they kicked them out and let them back in again. So it's interesting to point out that we're okay with North Korea having nuclear weapons, or at least they're not being considered terrorists anymore. But Iran, because they're so close to Iraq, we're not okay with it. It's a scary idea because Iran, Ahmadinejad doesn't like us at all. And he really, I feel, would not hesitate to launch a nuclear weapon. However, the problem is that he almost mutually assures the fact that his country is also going to be invaded, which he doesn't want to have happen either. So hopefully, we have somewhat rational actors in the world and they won't vote for something or do something that will ensure either both their death and their country's destruction and occupation by the United States. However, we're not really sure that Ahmadinejad is a rational actor, so perhaps that won't occur.
I believe that Iran having nuclear weapons is just unacceptable. For first part, I think that, I think that they would start an arms race between Israel, between Saudi Arabia, and maybe even Egypt. Okay, I just keep saying not enough, I'm sorry. Secondly, I just don't understand the motives behind Iran trying to get nuclear weapons. They're one of the largest oil and gas reserves on the whole world, yet they want to get nuclear energy for civilian purposes. It just doesn't make any sense. I guess.
We have to work with the international community to impose tough sanctions, tough diplomacy, but at the same time, be ready just in case, just as he said, just in case Ahmadinejad is not a rational actor. But first and foremost, our plan has to be to impose tough sanctions through the United Nations and other international organizations, and then obviously have that plan B.
Well, I think Iran is a threat to its own region as well as to the rest of the world, and we simply cannot allow them to acquire these nuclear weapons, and we need to do so. We need to confront this problem with sanctions and diplomacy. Obviously, we don't want to jump into a war with Iran when we're already in Afghanistan and Iraq. Ahmadinejad has threatened to wipe Israel off the map. Now, this is a statement that just simply cannot be taken lightly. I think it is worth noting, though, that Ahmadinejad does not hold all the power in the Iranian government. The theocracy does. But that doesn't eliminate this as a threat. I think one of the biggest problems with this is that the threat that it could get into the hands of a terrorist, and we shouldn't rule that out as a possibility. I think for Iran to attack Israel isn't that likely at this point, just because it would essentially be an act of suicide for them, because Israel is capable of attacking back in a second strike, because they have nuclear weapons as well.
Yeah, I think, and one of the biggest things to point out is that at the moment, Iran does not have the capabilities to actually, have, an all-on nuclear war. I think that we've got a couple, plenty of years, and we start sitting down and taking this seriously. Now, we can't let Iran just kind of sit by and start developing these sort of things. We have to, make sure that they're going to be taking the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Association, seriously, and let them come in and evaluate their stockpiles or anything that they've got, their nuclear facilities, to make sure that they do not have malicious intents in the area or in the world. And there's something that we've got to push for. We've got to make sure that other countries in the region, such as Pakistan, and once we go to stable Iraq, start pressuring Iran as well to do the same thing. It's a dangerous country with dangerous leaders.